Ray, let's say you're walking down the street here in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and you spot a wallet on the ground. It's full of cash, credit cards, driver's license, the whole thing. What do you do?
I'd like to think I'd mail it back to the owner.
Would you take the cash?
No, not a penny. It's not mine.
Okay, so you'd do the right thing.
I would.
So this week's story is about a man from Wethersfield who tried to do the right thing until he made a decision to do a very wrong thing, though he spent years convincing himself it was actually the right thing.
Well, that sounds kind of strange, Jeff.
And it's about to get stranger because this week we're searching Wethersfield for the ghost behind the Beadle family murder. Hey, I'm Jeff Belanger, and welcome to episode 87 of the New England Legends podcast. If you give us about 10 minutes, we'll give you something strange to talk about today.
And I'm Ray Osier. Thank you for joining us on our mission to chronicle every legend in New England, 1 week and one story at a time. And we couldn't do it without our Patreon patrons who sponsored this episode and keep it ad-free.
Thank you.
If you head over to patreon.com/New England Legends, for as little as $3 per month, you get early access to new episodes, plus bonus episodes that no one else gets to hear.
And we really appreciate all your support so far. And we appreciate it when you tell a friend or two about our show. When you post a review on iTunes, and it just takes a few seconds, and it goes a long way to helping other people find us in this crowded sea of podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts because it's free, and then you won't miss a thing.
All right, a word of warning about this week's story. It's kind of dark.
Right.
As you might have already guessed, it involves murder. So if you're sensitive to that, maybe this isn't the episode for you.
Okay, still with us? All right. Before we go too far into this story, Ray, see what I'm holding right here?
Yeah, you're holding about like 3 $1 bills?
Tell me a few things you can buy with $3.
Oh, you mean besides becoming a New England Legends monthly patron?
Right, besides that.
All right, well, not much. You could probably get a decent small-sized cup of coffee,
right?
Maybe a sandwich or two at a fast food restaurant, a Sunday newspaper.
Well, the reason we can exchange those $3 for coffee, sandwiches, and newspapers is because of faith.
Faith? Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, our monetary system operates on faith. We have faith that the government is backing up these paper banknotes, that we can exchange them for goods and services, and that's how everything keeps changing hands. If the faith ever falters, we're in big trouble. Inflation launches through the roof, pretty much leaving all of us poor.
Well, thank you so much for the economics lesson, Jeff.
I get it. We seem to be veering off course here, but hold thoughts of inflation and economics for just a few minutes because this is really the true story of William Beadle, a man who always tried to do the right thing.
It's December 1774. The Boston Tea Party just went down, and revolution is in the air here in the northeastern region of the continent. After the Boston Tea Party, the British Parliament closed the port of Boston to all ships, which, as you can imagine, crippled the economy of the city.
Yeah.
America is still new and not self-sufficient, so without supplies coming in on ships, the people of Boston need help.
So enter William Beadle of Wethersfield, Connecticut. Beadle and his wife Lydia live in town with their 4 children. Beadle is a wealthy merchant who cares very much about his fellow man, so he does the right thing. He donates money to the Boston relief effort to help his fellow countrymen in the Northeast. Like many of us who respond in times of tragedy, he does what he can.
Now, meanwhile, tensions continue to grow in the colonies. On July 19th, 1775, something tiny happens in Lexington, Massachusetts. Something so small, really. Just the slightest movement of a man's pointer finger. But that movement set something much larger in motion. A man pulled the trigger, sending a musket ball flying. It was the shot heard round the world.
Of course.
America is now at war.
War has so many consequences beyond the obvious loss of life and property. When battles are waged on your soil, battles that'll determine who governs you, resources can get scarce.
Of course. Blankets, raw materials, weapons, and things like that get pulled into the war effort.
There's another problem for merchants like William Beadle. As the revolution grows in intensity and purpose, people in the colonies start thinking that, hey, maybe this revolution thing isn't going away. Maybe we're not going to be subjects of England much longer. And that leads to more trouble, namely their money.
Well, what's wrong with their money?
The colonists are using something called continental currency. It's basically paper money, just like we have today. But with the war going on, no one knows what value this continental currency will have, if any value at all.
So a loaf of bread that might cost $1 could suddenly cost $5 or $10 overnight?
That's exactly right. So whatever money you saved up could be worth half of what it was last week.
Well, that would be a huge catastrophe for any society. You think community leaders would step in at that point.
And they did. On both sides of the Atlantic. Keep in mind, there's plenty of British loyalists living in the Northeast. Plus, local governors, they don't want to lose half their money either. So a law is passed stating that all merchants have to accept continental currency at face value. Merchants are not allowed to inflate prices.
Well, regulating prices isn't something any government has done well at any point in history. I'm guessing this doesn't work out well, right?
No, not at all. People are losing faith in their money, so prices double and triple in spite of the law. But William Beadle, he does the right thing. He follows the law. He accepts continental currency, and he doesn't raise his prices.
Well, it's good to know that there's still noble people who do what's right. Well, how did things work out for him?
Beadle is going broke. He watches his social status fall from the upper crust to the middle class, then just to the crust. And that's more than he can take. William writes letters to his friend John Chester.
I am in such a situation that I cannot procure food, raiment, nor fuel for myself and family. Is it not time to die?
Raiment means clothing. I looked it up, Jeff.
Okay.
William did the right thing, but now he's lost most of his wealth.
So William starts to plan. A dark plan, an awful plan. But it's still a plan. He's going to kill his family and then himself, rather than face a life of poverty.
That's terrible. I mean, what kind of man does that?
A broken one. The worst part about it is that this isn't some rash decision. William Beadle will spend the next 3 years planning the murders.
Wow.
The last straw came in March of 1780 when the very new United States Congress decided to devalue the continental currency by 1/40th of its face value. That's 2.5 cents on the dollar. So Americans have lost their faith in the old currency, and it's basically failed. Wealthy people like Beadle are practically broke.
So William Beadle doesn't arrive at this murderous decision overnight. He has to change the very nature of who he is. After all, he's always been the guy that does the right thing. William wrote,
If a man who has once lived well, meant well, and done well, falls by unavoidable accident into poverty, and then submits to be laughed at and despised and trampled upon by a set of wretches as far below him as the moon is below the sun. I say, if such a man submit, he must become meaner than meanness itself.
what this fall from the upper class means for Beadle is that he can no longer collect fine furnishings, that his children won't marry into well-to-do families, and that he won't be able to continue his friendship with the other wealthy noblemen with whom he previously surrounded himself.
William plans and thinks on this awful deed. He already knows he's going to take his own life, but is that enough?
As it is a father's duty to provide well for his flock, I choose to consign them over to better hands.
So he's going to kill his children. If he can't care for them, then they shouldn't have to suffer without a provider. But what about his wife?
I had some doubts whether it was my first duty to destroy my wife, as I had no hand in bringing her into the world, but I must consider her excellent heart that wishes to cause happiness to everything that breathes, her incapacity of gaining a livelihood or a proper partner after what will be called a shocking disaster, and her extreme fondness for her children that might cause distraction or a state of mind that would be worse. No, we must take our leaves of life together.
In William's warped mind, this plan is starting to make more sense. But that doesn't mean he's ready to kill. He's been taught his whole life that murder is wrong. It's against the laws of man and the laws of God. So he has his religion and maker to contend with.
When William's religion doesn't hold the answers he's looking for, he does the most American thing he can think of. He changes his religion.
So there's a religion that teaches it's okay to kill your family when you fall in hard times?
No, not that I'm aware of. But Beadle did worry about the eternal consequence of going to hell. But he found salvation, as it were, through a belief system called deism.
Deists believe that God created the universe and then kind of walked away and said, good luck, everybody.
Right.
They believe God didn't interfere with the world in any way, so there's no point in praying for anything.
But deism alone doesn't get Beadle spiritually okay with murdering his family. so he includes Calvinism.
Calvinism is a branch of Protestantism that teaches predestination, which means the day you're born, it's all been laid out for you.
Right.
Doesn't matter what you do, it's all God's plan. And God doesn't need to be served by his people because, well, God is great.
So if he combines deism with Calvinism and his own warped ideas, he comes up with this horrible justification for murder.
I mean to die a proper deist. I really think that there was never anything done wrong in the world. That we are all impelled to say and act all that we do say and act. That my killing my family, that a man destroying a nest of wasps or a fly escaping from another man that means to kill it, is as much directed by the hand of heaven as the making this whole world was. And if this is the case, there's no such thing as sin.
Beadle continues to plan. He's resolute in his reason, and he's warped various religions and belief systems to the point where he's rewired his brain to do the unthinkable.
I really believe that the true God supports me. While I am writing these very words and meditating this intended deed, no singular anguish of mind affects me. I can handle and look on the weapons of destruction and the dear objects that are to fall by them without tremor and without fear, because I function in the will of God.
It's now November of 1782. William intends to murder his family and himself very soon, but he's still struggling on whether to include his wife or not. On November 7th, Lydia leaves to visit family in Fairfield, Connecticut. She'll be gone for a few weeks. William decides November 18th will be the day he carries out his plan, while his wife is far away.
But something unexpected happens. Lydia has a troubling dream that her husband had written many papers and that these papers were spotted with blood. So she returns home 10 days earlier than expected. Lydia tells her husband about her dream, but it doesn't change his mind.
I am unappalled and think the hand of heaven is really with us.
November 18th arrives. That evening, William sends his maid on an errand to a friend's house to get a reply on a letter he had written the previous week. It was a trivial task, but he was adamant she shouldn't return without his reply, and he figured the maid would be gone all night. She'd have to stay over at his friend's house, and that would give him time to carry out his task. He had no intention of harming the maid. She was not part of the plan.
William planned the murder for the early morning hours, but when the maid returned later that same night unexpectedly, he knew he had to wait.
So William began taking a carving knife and hatchet to his bedside each night. He even performed several rehearsals of the murder. He'd walk into his children's room and stand over their beds holding the knife to see if he would feel any bad feelings at all. But he didn't. He took this as yet another sign that he was doing the right thing.
Meanwhile, his wife Lydia continued to have troubling dreams. She dreamt her 3 daughters all lay dead, that she was liable to a great punishment. But there was confusion, and once she broke from that cloud, she was free and happy.
And William took that as yet another sign from God to go through with his plan because, like always, he wanted to do the right thing.
On December 10th, 1782, William wrote one more letter to his friend John Chester.
Thank heaven, for I believe the day is now come. This is a glorious one, and Providence seems to smile on the deed.
Early the next morning, William rose early and told his maid to go fetch the doctor as his wife was up all night and ill. And once the maid was out of the house, William got his implements of destruction. And first, he killed his wife with a hatchet right by the bedside. Then he moved to his daughter's room and killed all 3 of them side by side on the bedroom floor. Then he killed his son.
With his family dead, William walked downstairs through a now silent house to his sitting room where he set his bloody carving knife beside him. Then he took a loaded pistol in each hand, raised them to opposite sides of his head, and William is dead. His fate sealed as the first mass murder-suicide in North American history.
This story made all the newspapers, including those in London. The gruesome killing has haunted the town of Wethersfield ever since. Some say the ghost of William is doomed to wander this town forever as punishment for his horrible crime.
Jeff, this may be the darkest legend we've ever chased. How do we end this?
I think we end this at the ancient burying ground in Wethersfield, here at the burial place of the Beadle family. We'll leave you with the epitaph on their headstone.
Here lie interred Mrs. Lydia Beadle, age 32 years. Ansel Lothrop, Elizabeth, Lydia, and Mary Beadle, her children, the eldest age 11 and the youngest 6 years, who, on the morning of the 11th of December 1782, fell by the hands of William Beadle, an infatuated man who closed the horrid sacrifice of his wife and children with his own destruction. Pale, round their grassy tomb bedewed with tears, flit the thin forms of sorrow and of fears, soft sighs responsive swell to plaintive chords, and indignations half unsheath their swords.
Some events you never get over, no matter how long it's been. Stories like this one really make me understand the term haunted.
I'm with you, Ray. And we can either choose to ignore these tragic tales and pretend they didn't happen, or do the right thing and let these old ghosts haunt us in the hopes that maybe we can avoid something like this happening again.
We'd like to thank Michael Legge and Tim Ellis for lending their voice acting talents this week. And of course, our music is by John Judd.
Until next time, remember, the bizarre is closer than you think.